All right, guys, let's get to what we're here for. All right, actually, the next presentation, what the board of directors would like to see in the very near future, it's just like we do for officials and referees and all the official training. We'd like to have a program for inspectors training. That's kind of where I started. I don't know if you guys, 20 years ago, I was the P-boy at Mohegan, and that's where I really started. So it's kind of dear and near to my heart. And so we were thinking about who could we have do this. And Frank Gentile from Florida, I know, was an inspector years ago, and I volunteered him against his will. And then I picked Andy Foster, too. We talked about it, and we appointed Andy to do it well without even knowing. So these guys are going to do the inspectors training. And if anybody wants to get involved in writing some criteria on inspectors training, please do so. And I'd like to have something together by next year at this time, have like a full-blown inspectors training that if a state or a tribe calls up and says, hey, we'd like you to come train our inspectors, we'd have criteria to do that. So they're going to explain what they do and how, and we may incorporate what this part of this program, but we'd also like to have our own as the ABC. Thanks.
So we want to talk together, okay? So
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Hey guys, so we're going to start, and actually built part of this presentation, and I gotta point this out. You know, a lot of this presentation was built. It was similar to Eric's presentation yesterday on really, you know, what our role is, and you know, basically learn from mistakes that you know we've all made in the past, and try to see if we can't figure things out. So I have 20 minutes, or me and Frank, and look, I can't teach you to be an inspector in 20 minutes. But what I can, what I can kind of impress upon you is emergency planning. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to focus on. So this is the mission of the ABC. I'm not going to read PowerPoint slides off for you, but I highlighted 2 sections on why we're here.
Yeah, the main thing is training, you know, proper training for the beginners. Because a lot of times these guys come in and they want to be inspectors because they talk to a friend that's doing it, and they don't know, they've never been involved in boxing or MMA or any of the combat sports. And that really helps if you are, but also that you have enough knowledge to know that you have to learn before you can just go to a dressing room. And it looks easy, like you're just going to walk out with a fighter, but that's not what it's all about.
So because, you know, I'm sure every one of your state or tribal commissions has something that looks real similar to this. The mission of your commission. Eric pointed on this yesterday. Okay, it's to protect the athletes and the health and safety, and everybody's got this same statement. I'm sure everybody's got it. So athletic inspectors, certainly in California, are core enforcement units in the field. Okay, so if you take like a program logic model and you put every single piece of what goes in to an event. There's licensing in the office. There's the medical exams with the doctors. There's all these pieces. The inspectors are near the end of this model because they're the people that's enforcing the rules in the field when you got there. And the end result is 2 results you're looking for at the end of this model. You're looking for safety of the athletes and safety and fairness for the public. Those are your 2 outcomes that you're looking. And you've got many, many inputs into this. Think of all the different pieces that you do to get to this result.
Yeah, like Andy said, when you're training these fellas, you have to, or you know, we have girls too, women and men. As you're training them, you have to let them know that they are responsible for anything that happens in that dressing room or to the corner, and it's their job. We try to deter them from arguing with anybody, because a lot of times We do have coaches and managers and trainers that get involved, and they go to different states. So when they come to your state, they don't like your rules. So they try to alter the rules, and these guys sometimes get in heated arguments, and I always try to tell them to get the head supervisor or myself, and we could put the fire out. And we handle it pretty easy. I just get the bout sheet and tell the guy, if you're not going to follow our rules, then that means you don't want to fight, and I'll scratch his name off the card, and automatically they're doing what we ask them to do.
Just like, I think you can read it, it's just what Frank said. You're going to try to perform the athletic inspector's activities. I mean, really, you don't want to talk to the fighters that much. I mean, you do your job, but you're not there to, you're going to have high-profile fighters in your state. They're not there to be your buddy. They're there to fight. I think this goes without saying, and it may be in one of my later slides, but I've got a couple that did it at the last ward fight. They were disciplined. If I see, and I don't do the Facebook, I don't even know how it works, but I got people that do. Okay, if I find my inspectors with those Facebook pictures with fighters in the dressing room or after, I don't care when it is, really. I'll sit them down. I wouldn't tolerate that. It's a little bit different if you've got other people doing it that are above my pay grade. You got politicians doing it. I can't do nothing about that. But I can do something about the people that are under me. So I would advise you strongly, don't steal the fighters' stuff, their gloves when they're done. I mean, these are good ideas. I mean, it happens.
It does happen.
So, this is where really I want to kind of focus on, because if you're following this kind of, just use it in your head, this logic model of where you've gotten past the matchmaking. You've gotten past the licensing requirements. Your commission is now moved to the day of the event. I mean, you're there. So, the inspector should have like a place where they check in at. Security should be notified. I mean, everybody should know where you're coming. And the promoter and the TV, if they're involved, should know who's in charge of this event. There should be no confusion. Frank has a badge. I don't have my people with badges. We don't. But Frank has a badge. I know a lot of places have a badge. We don't have a badge.
Can I say why? Yeah. Yeah, the reason why we went to the badge is inspectors weren't being respected, okay? And to identify themselves as an authority, we allow them to wear a badge. Now, don't get me wrong, not everybody in our commission wears a badge. Just the inspectors and the directors are the only ones allowed to carry a badge. And that the only reason is not to show that they're not allowed to go out of there and go to a restaurant and say, I'm a policeman, so give me a discount or anything like that. They're trained that it's only for the event. It gets them in the event. There's a problem getting in, and they don't say, because a lot of times we get credentials the night of the weigh-in. We don't see those inspectors till the night of the fight. So there's really a problem with some venues. They never know where you're going to have a designated place for the inspectors to come in and the employees that we have, our officials. So sometimes you can leave them at will call if it's a big event, but some of the smaller events you don't. So that identifies them as one of our workers, and of course suit and tie when it's a TV fight, and they also have an emblem like that on their shirt. But anyway, that's why we use the badge. I don't want it to be misunderstood.
So, I think providing the inspectors, all this is pretty common sense stuff, but you give them the bout order, who they're assigned, the official's assignments. Let me just point this out. In California, we had some confusion last year. The referees and the judges think that they thought that they were they thought that they had authority over the inspectors and were pushing the inspectors around. I've ended that practice. So I would suggest that if you see that happening, especially these guys, I mean, look, the inspectors are in there. My guys are state employees. They make $27 an hour, and they're over there with a high-profile referee making $3,000. You know, I could see how, you know, the referees got, you know, but just try to back your inspectors up. They're your people. The judges and the referees are your people too, but they're a different category of people. So I sent out my rings sheet. You got to have one of your more meticulous inspectors run through this ring inspection sheet. You want to document this. You want to keep it. Every event, we have a ring inspection sheet. We have it signed off on. There's a lot of reasons for this, and there's things to look for. And look, I put EMT on this slide, but in California we only use paramedics. I would highly suggest that your commissions only use paramedics for a lot of reasons. But if you use the EMTs, you know, you and the inspectors have got to get to know these people, at least introduce yourself to them, and we'll go into the emergency plan in a little while.
Yeah, it's real important. People don't realize how important of a job the inspector is because they really never see him because the poor guys, like Andy said, they don't make a lot of money and they're in the dressing room almost the whole fight until they walk out with their fighter. So they're in hot dressing rooms, and what we try to train them is like with the red and blue, like he distinguished here, and the size of glove. I mean, that's very important. Up to a certain weight gets 8 ounce, and in Florida we do 154 and up is 10 ounce, and under 154 is 8 ounce. And I know the ABC rules are 147, but we kept the 154, and we've never changed it yet. But also, they police the dressing room, which is so important because when you get parents down there, girlfriends down there, grandmothers down there, their kids down there, they come in. Everybody wants to be in the dressing room. Everybody wants to hug their son or their brother or whatever. And some families, there's a bunch of them, you know. So these guys are the bad guys because they have to throw them out. So what we came up with is every licensed coach or trainer that's working that corner that their name's on the medical sheet get a blue band or a red band. And if they don't have that, they don't get in that dressing room. And that keeps it where we can police the dressing rooms because we really had a bad situation a few years ago.
So, look, I mean, the ring and cage inspection, you know, you guys all know about them zip ties and MMA cages. Going to make sure those things are covered up pretty good. I mean, I've got 20 minutes, so I'm not going to go over everything you need to look for, but those are, you know, I've seen some pretty serious injuries from those things. Yes. You know, you got to make sure nothing's sharp or protruding. And look, this is a big one. I've got some referees in here. I bet Dan's seen this sometime or another in his career. You guys got to really decide who's going to shut that cage door. And don't forget, somebody's got to have that job. I'm not saying it's got to be an athletic inspector. Somebody's got to check that. And all the good referees will go and check it. And I saw John just recently. He went and checked one, and guess what? It was wide open. He just pushed it, and it would have started that valve. Something bad would have happened. And if you hang around long enough, you'll see that. So, you know, learn from our mistakes. Have the door shut.
I can say something.
Yeah.
I could say something on that. About 8 years ago, I was refereeing, and we were over in Fort Myers, and the guy's cage, you know, he picked his guys, were working the door, and the door swung out, and there was 2 big guys. They were like 260 and maybe 280 were fighting, and the one bigger guy ran at the other guy, and they ran right into the door, and just like Andy said, they both went through the door and out on the floor, and the guy had to be taken to the hospital that was on the bottom. He got hurt really bad. But so After that, we started, when the guy clips it, he has to pull it, and the referee checks and makes sure he's pulling it. And if it's locked in, it's locked in.
One thing I just point out before I move on, a wardrobe. Your inspector's got to make sure that fighter's got that mouthpiece when they leave that dressing room. It looks real bad on TV when that's forgotten. Yeah. We had a fight. It was a UFC something or another, and it was in Sacramento. And my inspector, this guy was just kind of interesting, and he he showed up without his fight shorts or anything. He just showed up. He was a fighter in the UFC, and he didn't have anything. So there was a Champs, or there was a sporting goods store nearby. So he runs over to the sporting goods store and buys basketball shorts to fight in. And my inspector didn't catch the tag. And if you go back and you look at that fight, you can see the referee reach down there and take the tag off his shorts during the match. So, yeah, so certainly we talked to that inspector, but you don't want to see those things happen. So just try to teach your guys not to, I didn't think about telling them not to take the tags off I tell them now. So the inspectors should make the path of the ring or the cage when you get called out. Make sure the participant has all the necessary equipment, just like I mentioned. Once you get out there, do another quick check of the ring. Stuff can change during the night, so just make sure the thing's good. And you got to observe the athlete and his trainers. Now, look, in between rounds, and this may come up, but I can't emphasize this enough. If you're in a cage, this is irrelevant. If you're in a ring, you got to get your guys inside that ring. That apron's not working. If you don't believe me, go read a recent report that just came out. That apron's not working. Get them inside. And I told my guys, I can see. That's fine. And you'll notice in California, I don't really have people that can't get inside anymore working on that side. They can do other jobs. They got to get inside that cage. You got to look at that fighter where you can see both sides of the face.
Yeah, that's a real good point, because anything could happen. And we try to tell our inspectors when they're in the corner. A lot of new inspectors get caught up and they start watching the fight, and they're not watching what the coaches are doing, and that causes a big problem, because these guys, they know. Coaches are smart. I mean, I was a coach before, and I did some things, and I always tell my inspectors when we're doing our seminars what I did, and then I tell them, forget that I told you that, because I never want you to repeat that to anybody. But there's tricks. There's a lot of tricks that these coaches have. Yes, sir.
And like Greg mentioned, I mean, if it's a relevant piece of information, let your referee and your doctor know. Usually the referee will inform the doctor, but certainly he's getting killed is not good information.
Especially when the coach and the referee goes over to the coach and he goes, "Is the guy all right?" Because I had this happen to me a million times. And the guy's just laying in the chair. It looks like he's ready. They're holding him up. One guy on the outside of the ring is holding the guy up, and he goes, "Yeah, he's fine. He's fine. He's all right. He's fine." You look at the guy, you look at him, and he can't even look at you. You know what I'm saying?
We did a study in California, and this is just something to keep in your back pocket. If you've got a fighter, specifically boxing, it's not so much in MMA. If you've got a boxer and their father's the trainer, you got to really pay attention. Okay? And let me tell you something. That son will not quit.
Never.
In front of their daddy. And some of the bad things that, you got to watch that. So just keep that in your mind.
Good point.
Oh, I love this one. We have this one every time. The cameras. You have your boxing show, and these camerawomen will just line up on the sides beside the judges, and they stick their camera, and they want the better shot, so they actually are putting this camera in. Sometimes it goes way in the ring. That's a safety hazard. Okay, so don't let them get the camera too far in, because if that guy gets knocked down and falls on that, we're gonna have a problem. We might see Eric or something. I don't know. but
Eric could grab that one.
Yeah. And there's Commissioner Martha over there, and she's had me sit some camera people out because she didn't. I mean, you see the cameras start coming in, and it's one of her bigger things. And I have another commissioner that's their big thing. So I can't impress that enough onto you, because you'll have these guys, and it's their job. So don't knock them for doing their job. But you just got to make sure they understand their role, and your inspectors can help you with that.
There are limits of where they can go.
Communication is one of the more important things that an inspector should do. You want to have them communicating so that everybody knows. Switching assignments in the back where your lead don't know what's happening, that's not a good idea. Okay, if they have any conflicts, they should tell you way in advance. But switching assignments in the back can mess the whole bout sheet up, and especially when you've got TV, it's just a disaster. So don't do that. Look, my commissioners my inspectors are empowered. Okay, you need to empower your inspectors. Okay, they don't need to come ask me for every little thing. It'll drive you crazy. They're empowered. They have cite and fine ability in California. That's how. I mean, we don't have badges, but they had a fine book. They very, very rarely use it. We might have had 2 this whole year, but they have it, and every boxer knows they have it. And $2,500 is a pretty decent fine. So they have it up to $2,500.
And also make sure you always tell your inspector not to touch a coach. We had an incident that happened last year where our inspectors are trained when somebody's knocked down or out and a referee flags off the fight, they're immediately to take the stool up into the ring or the cage. And what happened is a gentleman was sitting at cage side, one of the coaches, and I guess his shoulder, he had several operations on his shoulder. And my inspector ran up and just said, hey, I need that stool. And the guy didn't move, so he sort of just like pulled him away from the stool so he can grab the stool, and the guy's shoulder went out. So what do you think happened after that? I mean, it was a big investigation, and the guy. I tried to get. We had 5 doctors there. I tried to get one of the doctors, orthopedic, to put it back in. He goes, no, I don't want anybody touching me. I want to go to the hospital. And he's standing there with his shoulder out. And so he went to the hospital, and then everything that comes from that, what comes from that stuff, they try to, blame. It was a big investigation. I had to sit the guy down for a while, and then he was released, and he's back working again. But we watched the tape, and he barely touched him. He just said, hey, I need the stool. But that's a real big point. Don't touch him at all. You can't put your fingers on him.
So if you get anything out of this talk at all, I want you to get this out of it. We're going to go over the evacuation plan. If you're not doing it, you got to do it. I know you don't do it sometimes. You got to do it every single fight. Okay, we did it 131 times last year. Okay, got to do it every time. Amateur fight, professional fight, don't matter. Got to do it. Okay, so the inspectors have got to be involved in this plan. Okay, they're part of the deal. The doctors run the plan, but the plan works sort of like this. You guys probably already know, but we'll just go through it. So you have preferably all your doctors, but at least 2 of your doctors meet with the paramedics. First thing they do, and I'm with them, and your inspector, and some inspectors are with me. You're going to know where the hospitals there's two hospitals typically that we go to. We have a primary and a secondary. Okay, you got to have. If you need to have more than one ambulance if you're on TV, that's for obvious reasons. But if you only have one, you got to stop the show. But that's neither here nor there. Got to ask for their cards. Show me your paramedic card. Show it to me. Pull it out and show it. Everybody, you meet them, you shake their hands, you get to know them. The doctors will then walk to the ring. They're going to get inside the ring. They're going to show the paramedics where they're going to be. The doctors are going to decide, not the TV, not the promoter. The doctors are going to decide where the paramedics are going to be. And not just the paramedics, but where their equipment's going to be. Okay? Some people don't like that on TV. I get it. We can put a little cover over it or something. Got it. Okay? Now, then we're going to walk from the ring out to the rig. Okay? If you're in a big venue, you need to have it down there close to the loading docks, a free, obstructed. But look, if you're in the middle of a city, okay, like LA or whatever, you've got to assign an inspector, and I know this is waste, you just got to do it. You got to assign an inspector to sit out there with that ambulance to make sure that nobody comes and illegally parks in front of that ambulance. It happens. It happens. And I know people shouldn't illegally park, but it happens. 99.9% of the time, you're never going to use the EVAC plan. It's not going to happen. But when you need it to work. Now, there was talk about this in the ARP, so I'm going to go over this a little bit. Once the evacuation plan is initiated, now there needs to be a hand signal. Okay, it's loud in venues. When something goes south, it's loud. You need to make sure your inspectors are there to assist the doctor. They need to understand the doctors. They're there to do whatever the doctor asks. But they need to keep the corner out and keep the fighter safe. And if the doctor initiates the EVAC plan, it needs to be just the way that you practiced. That same route that I just walked you guys through needs to have remained unobstructed, so that you can get just like you practiced. Okay? And the inspectors can assist in this. Once the evacuation plan is initiated, I equate it to sort of like being under arrest, but that's a bad analogy. Once you're under arrest, you can't be not under arrest anymore. You got to do something to get. I've never been arrested, thank God. But you got to do something to like. I don't know. Bob knows, but you got to do something to get out of it. The evacuation plan. You're going. They're going. They're going to the hospital. They're getting on a stretcher, and they're leaving. Our job is to make sure they get there as quick as possible. Because at that point, time is, the doctor believes time matters, okay? And, our ringside physicians, now, look, we truck a lot of people, and it's fine, and that's not the EVAC plan. What I'm talking about is the EVAC plan. And, if you've got an inspector, somebody needs to look at their watch, because that'll come into play a little bit later. Eric might want to know, You got anything?
Yeah, Andy brought a good point up because some shows, if you're not prepared or things change, what really does happen, we get caught up in things, and our head inspector gets caught up in things, because there's so much going on if it's a major fight. And these guys will come and they say, oh, we forgot these seats and we forgot this, and they start adding chairs, and they change the whole perimeter around the ring or cage. And this happens a lot. And then naturally, we have to go out there and and get these guys, and the promoter comes over and they're mad at you because you're telling them, well, we sold these seats. Well, so what? That's not our problem. They have to move what they put in to keep that area. Like Andy said, it's crucial But see, they don't care about that, and they don't understand about that. That's not. They don't look at it like something's going to happen ever. They don't ever think that.
Look, Dr. Gooden.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing. It's been a long time since I've been working ringside, but it's also, and maybe you'll get to this, they have an evac plan for the dressing rooms too, because
Sure.
I remember there were instances on occasion where a fighter was in trouble in the dressing room, the fights were still going on, the paramedics were ringside, and we needed to get a fighter out of there.
Absolutely. Our doctors communicate with the paramedics when they come in, and they walk through that, and that's part of the deal. We even put oxygen in each dressing room that we work and one at ringside. So they're already aware of that.
Yeah, that's part of our plan, and it's a good point. I'm glad that she brought that up, because a lot of times you'll have a guy collapse in the back after it's already
Right.
After he's
Gone
already
to the dressing room.
okay. Now, you know, I read Big Greg's rules. I read all you guys' regulations when I have time. It's like my thing. And Greg controls that technical zone, don't you? That's the term in his regulations, the technical zone. I suggest you all control your technical zone. Okay? And that way, you're not going to have any problems with people stealing your seats or whatever. The doctors control those, you know, where the paramedics sit, and it's settled. It's in his case, it's settled law. I mean, it's part of his regulations.
I think we had a question there.
Greg.
You brought up the point. The case that just came out, was the wife's name?
Margot.
They brought New York case last year.
14.
Yeah, of course, the court case sort of just got resolved, and it all.
The IG.
New York did that, but the commission did.
Absolutely not.
No, the IG report just came out.
Came out.
The IG report's done.
The IG report
It's done. That IG report cost 3 inspectors their job, and the chairman of the New York Commission, basically his job almost.
2.
Gone. And the basic was, the kid's hurt, it's in the dressing room. This is well after the fight. And the point is, you know, for us, I think the report for an inspector, you never leave the arena until you make your last sweep of the
That's
dressing
right. Or the doctor. Or the doctor.
room. Or the doctor. Somebody still may be there.
That's right.
Always sweep. But if you get there, the guy's hurt, but he says, I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to go. What do you do?
I mean, look, we have their checks, Greg. You know,
Yeah.
we have their
They don't want
checks.
paid, then don't
And
go.
if the doctor is not comfortable, I mean, look, all this is, we can suspend them. There's lots of things we can do, okay? But if the doctor wants them, it's not an option at that point.
They got to go.
They've got to go.
I'm involved in that case as a party, so I'm not speaking on that case at this convention. Next year, my client will be out, maybe the case will be over, and I'll speak to the details of the case. But I can certainly say the one thing that all sides agree on, defendants and plaintiffs, they all agree that there was a huge, horrendous default by the inspector. There was far too little training of the inspector and far too little presence of mind by the inspector, and this is acknowledged, so it's not something that's going to be controverted. And he had some conflicts because, frankly, he was preoccupied with getting wraps and for a charity, selling the hand wraps, which you alluded to earlier.
You didn't know about that, yeah.
So
I didn't know that.
this stuff that Andy is talking about, and you're talking about,
Frank.
look, this is crucial. This kid is, if he was a vegetable, he'd be better off. I've seen the medicals, I've seen the pictures, I've seen exactly where he's at. He's in horrific shape. And I think it's pretty clear, it's going to cost the state of New York, as a result of certain actions, it's going to cost them many millions of dollars. Wow. Because of
But the bottom line is, they had, no, he should have went to the hospital. At that point, during that whole thing, he ends up going outside, waiting for a cab to take him to the hospital.
That is true.
And that, look,
That's what they told him. He was waiting for a cab to take him to the hospital. That's where, he went from bad to worse.
and
That's true. The inspector, listen, this is unbelievable.
it's true.
Showing how bad it is. The inspector became alarmed after the post-fight incident. Not because of a head injury, but for something else. Went to find the doctor. The doctor
he was peeing blood.
agreeing or whatever it is, you call it your particular jurisdiction. He then told the kid to go to the hospital. The question was, how do we get there? Cab. What is the nearest hospital? I don't know. I'm not from Manhattan. It's like it's a mess.
Oh.
I'm not from Manhattan. Ask the cab driver if he'll know.
Wow.
Now, you guys who get to New York and use the cabs, the cab driver is from Hungary, Bangladesh, India, pick one, and would not necessarily know the right hospital, especially for a brain trauma. That is a fact. That happened.
Well,
I have one other point. And next year we'll talk about that whole case a lot. Something that's come to mind. See, experience is the best teacher. There's things you never think, like the tags.
Pardon me?
Like the tags. You never think of it.
yeah.
Because it's first. It's come to my attention that you have to also inspect the pad under the kids. There are some fighters who are associate major fighters, big fighters, who manipulate the padding in a way that they think benefits them. By way of example, somebody tried to have 2.5 inches of insulin, which is an extraordinarily thick pad. It happened to be in New York, and the New York rule, which nobody knew, including the commission, was that you're supposed to be limited to 1 inch, which is the standard. Then another recent fight I was at, there was actually no pad.
Wow.
And unfortunately, both sides had to weigh in. The ring wasn't up. Both sides were concerned about it. There was no dispute amongst the fighters or the trainers. But what are you going to do when you're there the night of the fight? And it's a TV fight. You got a problem. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but it's a problem.
So anyway, you guys heard me say a little earlier, your inspector should know where the hospital's at. Now, I think Pat or Greg, somebody alluded to it on that final sweep. I can't emphasize this enough. Those doctors and those paramedics and these inspectors, they're all a team. Okay? Team don't get to go home when they decide to. Doctor gets to decide when the team goes home. Okay? So the doctor has to release those ambulances. The ambulances get released when all the fighters are gone, not before. Just that may come to help you one day.
Well, yeah, I mean, a good point is our doctors go sweep the dressing rooms. After the fights are completely done, it might be 10 minutes later, we might have a meeting, and then they'll go check the dressing rooms, or they're already back there, and they'll come out and say, everything's clear, and then they'll let the paramedics know, and they leave. And that's a real good point, because a lot of people don't do that, and this is the case here. Evidently, nobody went back to check the guy again, or how he slipped through the cracks to go.
He slipped through the cracks.
Right, because he shouldn't have been taking a taxi anyway. I mean, the kid should have been transported.
So I think this probably goes without saying, but I'll say it because it's on my slide. It's got to be a trauma 1 or 2. Okay, this is not, we're dealing with head trauma over here. You got to have your neurosurgeon that's ready to go. Okay.
And we're not blaming anybody, because a lot of times it happens.
I'm not even mentioning that
Right,
case.
right.
I'm just
It happened to
talking
us.
in generalities.
You don't look at that stuff when it's happening until after, especially if you have, like he said, a new inspector. He wasn't aware. Maybe he didn't know.
But a trauma 1 or 2. There are going to be times when you guys don't have access to a trauma 1 or 2. It happens. Big state, in a rural area. You got to make sure that your local medical center has access to the trauma 1 or 2 quickly. Otherwise, you can't sanction the fight. I mean, it's probably a good idea to think that through ahead of time. Insurance forms. I heard at the ARP all this stuff, my insurance only lasts, 15 days, or I don't know what kind of insurance they're using. But the insurance forms, I've got this one promoter, and he likes to hold on to his insurance forms because he doesn't want to pay the deductible for the fighter to go. Well, I don't let him do it. He just likes to try to hold on to them. But my inspectors grab them from him. And you need to have those insurance forms filled out. Signed. If you've got 10 fights on the card, how many insurance forms do you need?
10 signed.
You need 20. Okay?
You got 20
fighters. Now, if you're in an evac plan, this is kind of irrelevant because the insurance can come later. Okay? But it's still a good idea to have. And I threw it in here. Because don't let that promoter have those insurance papers because they are cheap sometimes. They don't want to send the fighter.
And a good point is we don't ring the first bell unless those claim forms are sitting on the table and signed. If not, we don't start the fights. And if they start saying, oh, we didn't get it, sorry. They should have been at the weigh-in really is when we should have had them. It slips through sometimes, like I said, but we don't start the fights without them.
On another note, though, if the guy's hurt, make sure your doctor documents that.
Of course.
Because 30 days later, when the guy has some kind of injury or something, I've dealt with insurance companies a lot of times on this deal. They don't like to pay when you can't prove it was from that particular event. So this is the last part of the presentation. Every commission needs this. If you don't have it, I'm happy to send you mine. Okay? You need a catastrophic injury and incident plan. This is a dangerous game we play. That's why we're all in here and we regulate this game. And, I'm going to give a presentation tomorrow, and it's got some statistics, and certainly the medicine's getting better. But up until this point, from the stuff that I've read, about 50% of the deaths that occur in boxing, and again, medicine's getting better because this is back from like the history of the sport and all this. But about 50% of the deaths that occurred in boxing, from the research that I've read, they're not sure that at that time, with what they had to work with the medicine that they had available to them, there wasn't a lot that they could have done. That person died. That leaves the other half of it. And it's getting better because medicine's getting better. So that leaves the other half where we can do something about. But that's going to be tomorrow's talk. This talk involves what do you do when somebody gets hurt bad or dies. So you've got various levels of the incident plan, and we got fatal. That's obvious. Non-fatal, and you've got serious, and then you've got different levels of whether it actually occurred there, directly or indirectly. Okay. So you have a 6-step process. So you have the incident management team. Now, if you've got a catastrophic incident, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea to do it in any 12-rounder, but any fight where there's a catastrophic incident, or you've got a fighter who's maybe he doesn't do so great, not in good shape or whatever, or you've got a guy who went all 12 and they both are beat up, probably not a bad idea, but it's a must. If there's an incident or the guy's hurt, you take them gloves. The inspector gets those gloves and gets those wraps. We have evidence bags on site. They go in an evidence bag and they're sealed. You're going to need them later. Okay. If that fighter dies, you got a homicide. Now, it's not a bad, it's just the word. Incident, Bob. It's just a word. It's called a homicide. And you're gonna be dealing with this. So it's a good idea to have those gloves and have those wraps. Okay? You have that's the evidence retention. Your incident management team should have already been delineated in your catastrophic incident plan. It usually involves the lead inspector or the executive director, chairman of the commission. Your inspectors are your front line. Okay, your notification protocol. Somebody dies, somebody's hurt bad. I'm making about 3 calls right away. Or my lead, if it's just my lead and I'm not there, they're calling me. If I'm there, I'm calling my chairman, my attorney general, and my press office. Okay. Now, it's important to note that once the EVAC plan has begun, and the reason I threw all this together is because it's all relatable. Okay, the EVAC plan, CSAC is now transferring care. Okay, your commission is now transferring care to these paramedics. They're going, but this is the transfer of care, and we be very, very clear about that. You know, now we may go to the hospital, and the doctors do oftentimes go, but the transfer of care is important because we're trying to get those people out. They're not a boxer anymore, they're a patient. Okay. And then there comes the press response. Your inspectors don't have a comment. Okay? I would strongly advise you as executive directors that your comment be ran through your press office and your chairman, and you only discuss facts if you're going to comment. You don't discuss opinions or things that might have happened. And you know, Frank says he don't do that.
No. What I meant, we give them a phone number.
Yeah. And look, and that might be the appropriate situation. But I mean, if Bob Bennett's going out of a fight, he's got 400 press people following him. You know, he can say no comment and all, but there comes a time when I think it's you don't need to stonewall. Just make sure you have your facts. Facts are facts. Nobody's going to change that. The IG report's going to come out. It's a fact.
Well, the only bad thing about that is when you do say things, because it's happened, and I know it has happened because it happened to me. Sometimes you'll say something that, like you're saying, Andy's saying, it is a fact and it did happen that way, but there's 20 news people, and by the time it gets to the 18th guy, it's changed. You know, and now they're writing stuff and putting it on the internet, and it's all wrong.
Well, like we have a statement, you know, like we have our press people, but yeah, Pat.
Now, let me give you a lawyer's perspective, because it's important for your own protection. Number one, Andy's doing such a terribly impressive job with everything he's saying. The lawyer representing the state has to be involved instantaneously. That has to do with his call with the attorney general. They have to assign something. It's true. Most lawyers will tell you can't say it, but you're in a public area. You don't have the luxury of just stonewalling. So there's going to be a tension there unless you've got an understanding lawyer who deals with this all the time. And you might not. You've got to talk to him. But one of the things that is very important is every time there's a car accident, there's 50 different versions. With respect to the case that we were talking about in New York, there were initially 8 or more people who were going to testify that the fighter came down from the locker room, was an upstairs locker room, and watched the following fight. They believed it. There are tapes of every move, and it wasn't so. And they weren't lying. They heard it from somebody, and they believed it. So you've got to be very careful, because you also get caught with incorrect information.
I didn't say you wouldn't say anything. I didn't mean it that way. What I'm saying is you don't start predicting what happened that you think happened. You know, start giving your opinions, because that's how it gets all screwed up. You could just say it was an incident. This is what happened. We sent him to the hospital, and that's it.
I believe a written statement, quickly done, is the best.
That's what we do.
You can always
Yeah.
twist your words, but
They can't
it's
trust
less
it.
That's
likely
right.
with a written statement.
Very good point.
And then the final step after after we've transferred and talked with the press, or maybe not talk with the press, depends on the situation, I suppose. We have to launch an investigation. Okay, most of you guys have investigative arms. You've got to get on the phone with those guys and let's see. And look, it's not necessarily trying to find fault on people. You just got to do it. You can do everything right, and there's still a bad outcome. I can't emphasize that enough in this game. It's dangerous. You can do everything you can. Eric's over there, and Eric might not take the case if everything's been done.
That's right.
Okay? But you still got to do it. Okay? And if there's something that you could do better, that they find, because look, man, IG people and auditors, they're designed, their whole lot in life is to find problems. Take their recommendations, they're good at it, and implement them into your procedures. So anyway, that's the end of the presentation. Let me just say this. Look, we have a lot of like forms and a lot of different things. I've got this thing. If anybody'd like to have it, I'll email it to you. But me personally, if any of you guys need anything from my office, give me a call. I'll help you. I'll send you forms. I've got drug test kits. I mean, I've got lots of things that I can try to be helpful with if you guys need it. And I'm here for, I answer my phone. All you guys can have my cell phone. I know I talk to you guys all the time. I call Bob all the time. I call Joe. I call Jim. I call all you guys. So this is what this organization's about, in protecting these fighters. At the end of this logic model that I've laid out, protecting the fighters and protecting the public is why we're here. Anything we can all do collectively to do it, that's what we should be about. That's it.
Same goes for me. Any questions? Questions? No questions? Okay, good.